Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This is our bonus episode of our AI podcast series. We've hit all 10 of the 10-part series, and now we're just getting back together to do a little refresher on all the different tools we've talked about. My name is Joe Daraskevich. I work for several medical societies and associations, and we're doing this to give another benefit to our members, whether it's helping you out in your home life, whether it's at your workplace. But without further ado, I want to introduce my coworker, Dr. Laura-Kathryn. Dr. Laura-Kathryn, tell her who
Hello.
you are.
Hello, everybody. Again, I'm Dr. Laura-Kathryn Neal. I currently serve as the National Dean for the College of Health Sciences at DeVry University, and I am a retired Chief Financial and Operations Officer from the healthcare field, running multiple different types of medical practices and hospital systems.
And if you've watched this series at all, you know the two of us get together every other week and we talk about something new. But we have a special guest this episode. We figured we'd bring in someone to kind of bounce ideas off and get his thoughts on all these different tools. So it's Fraser Cobbe. Fraser, go ahead and tell him who you are.
Thanks, Joe. I'm Fraser Cobbe. I'm the executive director of a number of state specialty and county medical society organizations, in the state of Florida and a few others across the country. So I'm super pleased to be here with you guys. I've been watching this series from afar, so I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a great deal. I hope I don't upset the mojo between you two as we bring a third wheel in here. But looking forward to this conversation and just been so pleased to watch this series and the cool ideas that have been shared with all of our members.
Yep, we're happy to have you, Fraser. And just so as a reminder, we had 10 different parts to this series. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through and talk a little bit about each of the tools that we talked about throughout the series. And if anything, sparks interest in your head as you're listening to this episode, you can always go back and listen to that episode along with the show notes, going back to 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. And the first episode, of course, was our introduction and just letting people know. So I think we've kind of covered episode 1 as far as telling the people who we are. So let's jump into OpenAI ChatGPT, the free version. Dr. Laura-Kathryn, if you can remember all the way back to episode 1, that was kind of how we got everyone, their mouths watering a little bit about the AI. So give them a quick little reminder about how you can use that tool.
So ChatGPT, as we know, is probably the first thing that came to the stage that brought everyone's awareness to, oh my gosh, all things AI. Not realizing, even specifically in healthcare, but a few other fields, AI has been around for at least 30, 35, 40 years, depending upon the field. So it just wasn't like a well-known household name, right? Kind of like Netflix, Siri, and Hulu, right? And so ChatGPT in itself I would say, is the entry level application that most people start with if they're dabbling in AI. From a medical field or practice management perspective, in our episode we talked about, we said that it was a great way to use creationary tasks, automate a few things, get better at saying things that are challenging. It's a great way to start developing patient education material in multiple language, because you can ask it to translate in whatever language that's available. You can also ask it to kind of create things in gender neutral language, which we also talked about in a couple of episodes. So it's really probably the most easy application to use because it's so available. They have multiple different versions of free versions in terms of how you need it, but you can do it for a lot more things than some of the other apps, right? They're a little bit more restrictive. ChatGPT has the ability to make Pixar characters. I have a Pixar app, avatar that's mine in certain videos, right, that I made through ChatGPT. I've used it for designing artifacts for education materials. I've used it for the creation of just basic Word documents in terms of how to do a process and steps, right? And so in itself, it's like if you want to start dabbling, it is the easiest, safest way in a way to do it. But again, in every episode, I always caution, especially those of us who are medical partners, you always want to use these things ethically, number one. And number two, you want to be always aware of what types of information you put in there because of HIPAA and the need to keep patient health information private. And also just even your organizational institution information, right? If there are things that are very proprietary to your organization, you have to be cautious because ChatGPT is open source, which means it's a large language learning model. It's taking information from bazillions of people all over the world, right? And taking it all together. And if you give information out there, it's out there. And so, I always say, be careful, trust but verify that your stuff is staying safe.
Yeah, and we talked about how it can make emailing a little more simple for people, where whether you're getting an email that's 5 pages long and you want to boil it down into a few bullet points, it's an easy way to just run that through ChatGPT. And the other way around, if you have a long thing that you want to turn into a small email, you can flip that through ChatGPT. But I'm interested to hear Fraser Cobbe's take on this new tool that people are using. You have any experience with ChatGPT at all, Fraser?
I've dabbled a little bit, but the best thing I can share is I ran across somebody you inspired through this series at our recent rheumatology conference. I was talking to our lobbyist, and she was so inspired on how to use this as a tool. She's actually investing in some classes on how to refine her command technique and role playing, just to make sure she's doing the right prompts to spit out the very best product. So I know you've inspired some folks with that just first session that y'all did. So I was excited to hear that. Obviously, I need to dabble a little bit more and really take advantage of the tool in what I do day to day. But I know for one that you definitely inspired Tony to get more involved.
Oh, I like
Yeah, and
hearing that.
I was
I
there for
love
that
that.
conversation as well, and she was just like trying to figure out how she could use things better. And we just, over a couple beverages, we were talking about this podcast series, and then she watched, and then she kind of utilized. And that's kind of what we've been the whole time, Laura-Kathryn. We've been talking about people, try these things out, and then let us know how they're going. So, any thoughts on Fraser's comments?
I think that's great. And the thing is that there's kind of three, really four now that Copilot is a bigger impact now with the Microsoft products, but there's three real big versions that are very similar, right? You have ChatGPT, which was a precursor. Claude.ai came out the next time, and that's more of a conversational kind of thing. And then Google had their original version, which was Bard, which is now called Gemini, right? So you have ChatGPT, you have Claude, and then you have Gemini, and then also Copilot has its own version. But the thing that I find interesting about any of them who use these things is they each kind of have a value add depending upon what you want. ChatGPT has its own inserted GPTs where you can do the artwork, you can analyze data, you can, summarize, upload 7 or 8 white papers on a topic, have it create a summary for you. I mean, I've done that, taken minutes and recordings at conferences and brought all 7 sessions I put together, slapped them into a PDF, stuck them into Claude, which is I call him my boyfriend. I spend as much time with Claude as I do my spouse. I put them all in there and I said, hey, give me a 1 pager to provide to my supervisor. In my case, it's the provost, but to provide to the provost to show where these sessions were value added for me and my role. And literally, it took a minute and a half. It scraped through 7 PDFs, went through and designed a really cool 1 pager that had basic bullet points. And then at the end, I said, okay, this is great. Now refine it a little bit and include at the bottom, 3 action steps that I can take from this in my role. And it gives you, those large language models think faster and quicker for you, but they give you, it's again, human discernment is important and making sure that we're using it wisely. But it is a great time savings to do some of those things. Joe, I got one of those emails you mentioned earlier that was like, oh my gosh, how much time did it take for you to type this email? And I was like, I'm not reading it. I am a Burger King generation, if you will. I want it my way right now. I don't want to read a 50-page email. I want to know what you want from me in the first 4 minutes. Might be also a leftover from my military upbringing, growing up in a military family too. But I mean, I literally was like, I need, okay, I scanned through it. Nothing was proprietary. It's more of a in the know kind of a thing. Dropped it into Claude. I asked it to summarize the basic ask in 1 sentence and then give me 4 bullet points that were the biggest highlights from the email. Took 30 seconds. I got what I needed. I was able to respond instantaneously and move on with my day. So, to your point, Fraser, there's ways that we can use this, but the prompting piece is important. And that matters in any of these applications that we're going to talk about today. Because it takes some time to figure out the nuances, to figure out the way you want it to do what you're asking it to do. But if you use one particular app, I use Claude more than I use anything else, it starts to learn you, which is helpful. And many of these you can also kind of put some programming in. Don't use, like mine has, don't use flowery language. Don't use always. Don't use appreciate. Don't use this. I don't talk fluffy bunny. Don't give me fluffy bunny answers, right? But then you can also say, if you're writing something specific, one of the most important things that you can do is how do you ask it to do? Come in and say, you are posing as X and you're responding to X audience. this is what you want to put together. And it can do those kind of things, and you can nuance it and flavor it and things like that. So I think practice, Fraser, is what makes perfect. We've said that for eons, right? But I think finding one of the apps that is a better fit for you also takes playing around with them. So you need to use more than one until you find that comfortability, which is one of the reasons why we had so many different choices to talk about in the series, to give people some different opportunities to explore for different reasons, right? Some apps have one purpose, some apps have another.
Yeah, and it's really interesting when you meet someone who had, like, Dr. Laura-Kathryn has a lot of experience with all of these tools, but just in conversation with people, whether you're at a luncheon or whether you're, at a conference, some people are just getting started with these tools and some people have been using them for a while. So talk to your friends, talk to your colleagues that might have some experience and just say like, hey, what prompts should I, what should I be doing? And they can help you out. So it's very interesting to see the different people on the different pathways. But speaking of the pathways, we've got 10 episodes to talk about today, so we're gonna move on. Oh, Fraser's got one more thing.
Quickly, our next podcast series you just named, Dr. Laura-Kathryn, it's AI Confessions. I love it. You mentioned your relationship with Claude, so AI Confessions is going to be our
There
next
we go.
series.
I love that. I love that.
You're right. So we'll bring the gang back together and we'll get that one going ASAP. Speaking of ASAP though, let's move on. So if you like any of that ChatGPT stuff, that was in episode 2. Go back wherever you're listening to this and you can see all the episodes along with the show notes next to them. But moving on for today's wrap-up episode, our next episode was episode 3, where we talked about Canva. Dr. Laura-Kathryn, if you want to jump in and let them know a little bit about Canva.
Well, Canva is one of these amazing applications. It has over 250,000 pre-made templates for you. So like if you think you need to make it, it can help you get there, which is great. It also has drag and drop features, so you don't have to be a design genius to make a poster, a design genius to make a website background. You don't have to be a design genius to do anything with that. And you can upload templates that related to like your branding, which was helpful. Like many organizations have their own branding, their own colors, their own this, and you can actually upload your templates. You can pick things to where anything you make has that consistent branding. But I love the fact that this particular application is a great way for you to elevate things that you do pass out to others. It's a great way to set your brand. What do we want to be seen for, not just known for, right? Because we know as humans we are visual learners first. What we see is kind of gives us that first impression, right? Besides what we hear and besides what we feel. And Canva is a great tool to create all of those features. People can see, look, and feel and learn about you from a single artifact. And Canva is a really easy way to do that. So if you need to create patient education cards, you need to create appointment setting cards. You want to put posters up on the wall. You want to redesign any of your patient intake forms. Canva is a great way to be able to do some of those things in a very low stakes environment. That is proprietary, right? Because you actually do it to where you have your own personal login. But the thing that I like about Canva is you can actually do an organizational login as well, to where you can have an organizational setting. Not every one of the AI apps allows for organizational use. And Joe, that's something we actually misstepped and didn't speak about in our Canva episode, is that it does have that organizational feel to where you can have one enterprise, if you would like to call it that, application, and then anybody from your organization can use it, and you can pre-build it to where they can only use the color scheme you have. You can even restrict it within that. So that's a great feature to have, and that's actually the organizational one's more of a paid version, but the $20 a month one from Canva, you can do pretty much anything you want, which is pretty
Yeah,
awesome.
and a lot of what we talked about is collaboration, and that's really nice for someone gets it started, someone works on a flyer, but they have to run out the door to a meeting, and someone else from the team can jump in and pop in the logo or whatever needs to happen to finish. Fraser, any experience with Canva? Any thoughts on how Canva could make our lives a little easier?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I know our team has been using it quite a bit on all the various programs and, graphics and everything that we use in social media and for our meeting programs and websites and everything and flyers. So I know our team has been using it a lot. I'm not sure yet if they're on the enterprise version. So that's my homework to go back and figure out if they're on that or if they all have individual accounts set up. But yeah, I know it's made their life a ton easier. They look a lot more tan these days. I don't know if they're spending more time on the beach because they are so efficient now. I know creating graphics and things like that is something with my brain is difficult to do often. But I know they've had had great success with it, and my wife uses it quite a bit too, just around that house with the things she's doing. I know invitations to a family event she did just a couple of months ago using Canva as well. So I know it's a tool out there that, especially if you're working in graphics and invitations and things, again, establishing your brand, I think it's ideal and something our team's got great value out of.
And I
Yeah, and
also
what
think that to your point with that, Fraser, they have there's even a couple of series out there that you can look at. You can watch them on YouTube where it talks about how to build your social media brand using Canva. And now with the added additional features of influenced AI that Canva now has in it, it's grown more to be than more than just a brand, right? A brand developer. Now you can actually say, put me together 10 social media posts on this topic that look this way. And it will spin that out and give you all 10. And then you can pull them down and design them and have them set to run on your social media pages. So, like if you're going on vacation for a week and you're a social media influencer, Canva's the way to go because you can actually go and design your entire series and your social media page is working for you while you're on the beach.
Yeah,
Nice.
I wanted to chime in on what Fraser was saying a little bit about our team in general working, in the same direction. Where I don't want to name any names, but we had a conference. We were about a year out from it, and first we were working on the prospectus, and wanted to redesign the prospectus for sponsors and things like that, and kind of came up with a theme, a nautical theme, a kind of a theme with the coloring and everything. And then every step of the way, we kind of used that to shape what the next thing was. Okay, now we're working on the program. Now we're working on graphics for the conference, and it all kind of it felt more unified than if everybody was kind of working in their silos. So it's a lot, like I said, I'd say it again, but collaboration is huge with this AI series, and Canva is one of those tools where we all can kind of pick and choose what we're doing and work in the same direction all at once. Any last thoughts on Canva before we move on, guys?
Well, back in the day, we used to have Adobe. And Adobe was not, you had to almost become an intentional designer and be a genius to be able to use Adobe. And Canva made Adobe kind of almost non-existent as far as that's concerned, because now the everyday user can use it. And that's one of the things that's most valuable, I think, about any of the things that we have with AI tools now, is that it is accessible to the end user, and it's not complicated. You can do things that look fantastic with very little knowledge and very little education about the process itself.
Yeah, and you mentioned Adobe. I've been in past careers where you get to somewhere and they're like, "Hey, can you work on this real quick?" And then you have to work with the IT department to get a license for Adobe and all that kind of stuff. Whereas Canva, you just
Log
jump
in.
right in. Yeah, exactly. It's pretty handy. All right, so we're keeping it rolling. Episode 4 was WhatsApp Business. That was a fun one. Laura-Kathryn, you want to jump in and give a little recap?
Well, the thing about WhatsApp is it's an automated greeting kind of a message kind of thing, right? And it's a little bit more user friendly than other things. We're used to using things proprietary at work, right? We use Teams, we use Slack, we used to have Instant Messenger, right? AOL Instant Message. Oh my gosh, I totally just dated myself. But yes. And so WhatsApp is really more of a way to be able to do those quick responses. So you can leverage the WhatsApp in conjunction with, say, like your patient portal, which is one of the things we talked about, where you can get easy answers, FAQs, we used to call those, right? Frequently asked questions. WhatsApp replaces a lot of that, and you can have the AI do a lot of those things for you. Tell them where your office is located, directions how to get there, what your office hours are, what the information, insurance information you accept, right? And it creates that 24/7 availability when your office is not open. Like, how many of us, hello, raise of hands, think, oh, I got to call the dentist to make an appointment, and it's Friday. And it's Friday afternoon. They're on the golf course. They are not at work, right? And so these types of models, like WhatsApp and a few other ones that are in the same genre of AI applications, can partner with other things to do that. And then also, it can create avenues for specifics. For example, if somebody's a new patient, say press 1 if you're a new patient, then there's a particular track, or you log in and you're like, I'm a new patient. You hit that button, and then these other pieces activate. Or this is a follow-up care. These are those. Or I have an urgent situation, right? Call 911. Don't call me. But it could be urgent in a lot of different ways. And if you think about applying this to more than just the healthcare industry, right? Larger perspective, there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. And you can prioritize things when they come in too, right? What is the most overwhelming thing that happens when you come to work in the morning? The number of Teams messages that are on your system, the number of emails that are in your system, what's going on with your appointment schedule, and things like this can kind of help you also categorize things in a way that it streamlines to draw your attention to the most important things first, and then the stuff that can wait can fall to the side. And when it comes to medical practices, that's super important, right? Because you don't want somebody to inadvertently miss that one thing and it costs the patient's life, right?
Yeah, and we joke a lot, but there are some things that are very serious, and we've all been on that other side of the phone where you're trying to call and you're not having any luck. And I think the people that running these practices realize there are people out there, and this is something that makes things a little bit easier for everyone that's involved. Fraser, any thoughts on WhatsApp business and how it might fit into the puzzle?
No, I think certainly your comments around the healthcare arena in particular, and patients that are stressed out or concerned about anything that may be going on, and their pain or issues don't come 9 to 5 like you mentioned, right?
Mhm.
Just having that ability to communicate with a physician is so comforting for a patient and a family as well. So I think any tool that can extend your availability for patients without overwhelming you from a lifestyle standpoint is ideal. So I know we've got a couple of super users of WhatsApp down in South Florida. They've got WhatsApp groups for all of our different delegations to different meetings from an association management world. So they've been using the tool a lot. So they ping me quite frequently on WhatsApp, but that's all right. I can manage it. I get communications from them, and I can look at it when need be. So definitely they believe in the tool. They're dragging me along, and we're using it more and more. But certainly, as you mentioned, the capability within the healthcare arena for advanced communications with your patients, I think is ideal.
Yeah, and that's
It's like better than GroupMe, right? We use it at church. We use it for, okay, everything's ready. This is what's going on for the servers at church. Those of us who are volunteering to help with church service and stuff. We use it at church all the time too. And the same thing, Fraser. It's like, oh, I got dragged along unwillingly. And then I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is actually kind of cool. Maybe this is
Yeah.
a better way than, 66 text messages and you get a there's so many ways we can communicate. And if we come up with structures that work, that can streamline some of them, that's also the end goal, right, Fraser? It's like, oh, did
Mhm.
you need one more? No, but if this group has find significant value add by using this application, then let's see, is that the use case for us to apply it in all these other places? And that's a really core thing too, is like what Joe said. You want to talk around with others. What are you using? How are you handling this? I'm not running this problem. Oh, this is our solution, right? That's how we learn anyways, right? Using our community to inform what we're doing. And then and learning, okay, this works. And we've all done that, right? We all started with, I used to do this and now I'm doing this, this, and this because my peer group, my community group, my organization I'm involved with uses it. And now I don't know how to survive without it. Right. So that's kind of what happens naturally with a lot of these types of apps.
Yeah.
yeah, and then
And
go ahead.
I was just going to say media sharing images and videos through WhatsApp seems relatively easy too for sharing larger file documents, which can be a hassle if you're trying to
Yeah.
get something to somebody and your traditional email isn't working. So we found great benefit in that too.
Yes, because
Yeah,
your IT department is controlling your email and your settings and what you can send through email, right? And,
Exactly.
and it puts those file restrictions on there because it has to do with server bandwidth and things like that. So some of these things are great workarounds. You're not violating anything, but it's a great workaround to solve those. It's crazy. That was a perfect example of how we can use these things to solve something that we have boundaries around other things because of larger picture things that make absolute sense to have those boundaries. But then these are other ways where we can still do what we need to do in a quicker fashion, but with a different process.
yeah, and then another thing I want to point out too is it's like everyone has their little experience with WhatsApp or with ChatGPT and things like that. And then what this series is doing is kind of saying, hey, you might have your feet might be a little bit wet, but also think about utilizing this in your workplace and making the work life a little bit better. And on that same note, our next episode, episode 5, was about Google Forms, and that was one that was everyone's heard of Google, everyone's familiar with that kind of thing, and we tried to make it something where, hey, this is something that it's easy to get involved with. So, Dr. Laura-Kathryn, jump into Google Forms for everybody.
I mean, pretty much if you're breathing, you understand what Google is, right? And Google has Gmail and it has a calendar and it has forms and it has sheets and it has all these different kinds of things. The thing that I love about Google Forms is there is a version that you can use that is HIPAA compliant. That is huge. for an application to pursue what it takes to do that. And in healthcare, that's really paramount for us, right? So they have a HIPAA compliant version that you can use for patient satisfaction surveys. You can use for intake forms. You can use it for appointment requests. And it has automatic data collection involved in it, which is outstanding. And it's a great way for you to do that. So it has some automated features. You can integrate it with Google Sheets, which means the survey comes in, it dumps into Sheet, which is basically like Excel, but the Google version, right? And you can actually create really important insights and reduce that administrative burden by your front desk, by your administrators, by your leadership, even just the person who's that takes all the data in and tries to figure it out and get that sentiment analysis, which we'll talk about with another app in a little bit. It brings all those things together, and even just with, I use the HIPAA version because yes, I still do some consulting and I do some stuff with medical practices still, but the other side of that is it's also very similar to what we need for FERPA, right? Which is on the higher education side, which is like their higher ed's version of HIPAA, and and keeping private information from students the same way we do with health information. So Google Forms is great because it's universal. It doesn't matter what phone kind of app you have. If you have Apple, Samsung, whatever. If you can access Google, you can do it. Whereas other things, like if you use Microsoft Forms, which most of us use in the work environment, it's not very translatable to the personal environment. And Google Forms is universal for that. And it's not restrictive by country. It's not restrictive by system. Google is, I mean, it's kind of like Siri. It's everywhere.
That's right. Fraser, any experience with Google Forms? I know you probably have experience with Google. Anything with Google Forms?
We have some of our committees that have been using them through Acro, but the one thing I do like, just to go back to the patient satisfaction surveys. I mean, we've got companies, of course, that are out there that'll come in and help you manage your patient satisfaction, collecting that data. And so you can spend a lot of money to hire a consultant, or you could kind of use Google to help you through that process. So it's great that there's tools. One of the things we wanted to do is give some cost efficiency ideas to our practices too through this series. So that's a clear example there where there's consultants that'll do it for you, or you can play around and do it on your own. So,
Or you
and
can
the
bring a
fact that
little
it's HIPAA
super nerd in
compliant is
like me,
just
and I'll show
fantastic.
you how to set it up, and then I'll show you how to maintain it, and then we have a good relationship. Hi, bye, and have tea, and then we're out. So I mean, there's a lot of that that's easy, and I love that you brought that up, Fraser, because that was the intent with the choices I made. As a retired CFO, I know how budgetary constrained many of our healthcare organizations are. I've run medical practices on a shoestring before, so I get it. And you want to work smarter, not harder, and you want to do it more efficiently and cost effectively. And so that's why we did. Joe and I were very intentional about the free version is what we talked about. Then we did talk about you could escalate if you find this is value add and you want to go out to the enterprise version or whatever. But we always use the free version first because we want to make sure that even the smaller practices, free version is more than enough to cover what they need. And there's no need to spend more and like you said, Fraser, go bankrupt trying to solve a problem. And patient satisfaction surveys are huge, no matter, and consumer satisfaction surveys, period. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. You can still use it for that. We use it for students. I use it for my staff all the time, you know.
And I just got to say, one of my favorite terms that Laura-Kathryn uses is free 99. We use
I
the
do.
free 99 version. You can go pay for whatever you want, but we like to talk about all these free things. And just in my work day, I talk to a lot of different types of doctors. Some are high up at hospitals, some are running their own practices. And just over the last few months, it's been very exciting to run into people that are from both sides, but the smaller practices kind of jumping in like, hey, these things you guys talk about, it's huge for us small fish in a big pond, because it kind of makes us, whether we're talking about patient satisfaction, whether you're talking about outside of regular office hours, like it makes you feel like you can compete with those bigger organizations even when you're a small fish in the sea. All right, if we're ready to move on, this next one's one of my favorites. Episode 6, we talked about Trello. And I just got to say real quick, the way we did this series was it was the first 5 were free for everyone, and then the second 5 were members only. So if you're seeing this and you're not a member and you hear about episode 6 being Trello, all you got to do is join one of these membership organizations, and you can see those 6 through 10 episodes. So Dr. Laura-Kathryn, jump right into Trello. I know it's one of my favorites. I know it's one of yours as well.
We had so much fun with that episode. I think that one, and I think one of the future ones as well, was like the best. So I mean, back in the old days, we used to use K-band boards and all this higher level thinking. It was really more geared towards, the industrial side, manufacturing side, industrial processing side. But the thing about Trello is it kind of made a visual thing. Your post-it notes come live into your computer, and it's mobile. So you can access it on your cell phone. You can use it on your tablet. There's a lot of different ways, your iPad, whatever. You can do it. And the thing that I loved about Trello, we actually talked about Trello in more than one episode actually on the
I know.
on the paid side, because there was a lot of synergy that came together with two other apps as well. But Trello in itself is mobile accessible. It has features that solve kind of coordination challenges you talked about, even with Canva, with everybody working on the same product. It's kind of putting everybody in the same spot. You can do it across multiple locations, across multiple shifts. It's ideal for very complex medical operations and also for the simplest, right? We did in the other episode talk a lot about the different ways we could use it related to hiring and retention and onboarding, which is, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the most important thing about Trello is it basically takes those process oriented things that you have, like you're doing this on paper and you're doing this process over here and this one's over in this computer and this one's over, and it brings them all together into a simple, if you will, board, which is why we call them Trello boards, that you can actually manipulate, move around, and track. You can use it for major project implementations, like raise your hand how many people have gone through installing EHR in your system. Oh my goodness, that is a massive project, right? And so it takes those complex kind of 1D, very boring Excel project management, Gantt charts, all of those kind of things where you manage projects, and it puts it into a visual way to where you can easily move the cards around, shift things around, assign things to people, set it up with reminders, have notifications, all those things that you can't get when you're managing a project in Excel, that you can't get when you're trying to do it on a piece of paper. And that, I think, is the most valuable add. And then of course you and I, kicked around a few things on how your spouse can be using Trello as well, and some of the things that she does, and how I use it in my personal zone. So episode 6 was probably our funnest that we did, and the most versatile in terms of, like, you could literally use Trello for so many different things.
Yeah, and one thing I really liked you talked about back in one of the episodes we talked about Trello was where you have, the different sticky notes and things like that, and it's, you're all working toward the same goal, and you might see someone's sticky note of, like, oh man, they're working on this one part of the project a lot, and it lets you know, like, either they forgot to move it to done, or maybe they are stuck on a part of the, hey, are you taking a little longer than you thought it was going to be working up on that prospectus? Like,
Yeah.
let me jump in and help you on this other side. So sometimes you can be working on totally different things and not realize that someone's spending a little extra time on something, but Trello makes you kind of visualize all that at once. So there's a lot of, and like you said, like grocery lists, things, the Trello is just like unlimited, all kinds of cool
I
things.
have a Trello book for recipes too. So, I mean, I'm a little anal retentive about it. But the thing, to your point, it's that visual way and create some visual cues, right? Because you're right. If a team member is actively engaged in a piece of the project and it looks like that project is stalled, it's hard to tell that in the ways that we used to do project work before. And now, if you use something like Trello that has those visual pieces, those notifications, it could be like exactly you said, they're just doing everything in the one thing instead of moving it through the process like they should be, or they really are stalled, and it's a great way for you to catch that early on rather than, oh, we're 4 weeks behind on a product and here's where we are, right?
Right.
And so that visual cueing, the notifications, the bell ringers, if you will, of, hey, this is, red light alert, that kind of stuff, it creates more of that value add, again, to that working smarter and not harder. And it lets everyone know who's inside that particular board what the status is. You don't have to have repetitive meetings for everybody to check in and say, here's what I'm doing. You can have, if you can have a crisis meeting, oh, we've got one board that's stuck, or we've got one tile that's not moving. You can have a meeting about that, but it reduces also meeting time, because now everyone can see the status of what's happening in every aspect. There's no hidden corners. There's none of that going on. So from me, somebody who lives and actually like has like 30 meetings in a day, because everybody's got every 30 minutes of your life booked, reducing meetings is also paramount. And so anything that you can do to leverage these applications to do that, the running joke is this meeting could have been an email. Well, this entire meeting could have been a Trello board,
Well,
right?
speaking of people who spend a lot of time on meetings, Fraser, do you have any thoughts on Trello? I mean, I know we've been kind of talking about surface level stuff with it, but
Yep.
what do you think?
Oh, and I do love meetings, Joe, for sure. So
I know
don't
you do.
replace my meetings with these fancy tools. No, we've got one organization in particular that uses it for onboarding new volunteers because they're a volunteer-driven organization, and every year they've got two new hosts for their annual meeting. So rather than spending time to verbally bring them up to speed on what needs to be done and what deadlines, they all use Trello. So right away, you've got every milestone that you need to hit along the way to planning a successful event 12 months out, and just the ability to onboard that new volunteer to give them comfort that they know exactly what they're doing. There's no hidden things that they're going to stumble across at the last minute they haven't thought of. It's all there. And so onboarding new employees, I can definitely see the value in doing that. Again, looking at everything, the scope of work from a 12-month process and having it there in front of you. I mean, so valuable. So definitely have enjoyed working in Trello.
Yeah, or even if you lose an employee who's vital to a project that's going on and you just want to move someone else over to that position, it's, rather than sitting down and having meeting after, it's just, hey, jump in this Trello and we'll all, work it out together. So it's, I'm excited about Trello, and like we said, my wife is already, trying to do things around the house with Trello and using it for just simple things, but then you can transition that into the workplace. So any last
It,
thoughts on Trello before we move on?
I'm just wondering
Um,
if is Trello spouse a real thing? Is that like a new
Yeah, yeah,
term?
yeah.
Trello spouse?
My
Yeah.
Trello,
you want to talk about confessions? My Trello boards are much more organized than my spouse and actually stay on task and actually get their projects done. Versus my spouse, who I adore, is more like 17 projects at once, and you have no idea where he is with any of them. And so, yeah, he was my inspiration to make some decisions about managing some few things around the house and around our life in general and his business because he owns his own business as well. So I'm the unpaid Trello assistant for him in his business, and I think it makes a difference in a lot of ways. And Fraser, you touched on a few things. We'll hit it in episode 9 where we're talking about the HR side of things. So it's more than just the onboarding piece, and we had some pretty fascinating conversation about that in episode 9.
and I'll just jump in real quick. I'm the one in our household who sometimes is not as organized, and I have a lot of ideas and a lot of places to be and people to talk to. And the hope is that Trello kind of brings me in a little bit and keeps me on track with all those great ideas that I have.
Mm-hmm.
Any last thoughts before we move on to episode 7?
No.
All right, let's go. The next one's Grammarly. And again, a real quick reminder that if we're moving fast, we're talking about a lot. We're trying to keep this condensed as can be, but feel free to go back to these episodes, listen to them, and read those show notes as you go through each episode and kind of dig in deeper. But the next one's Grammarly, Dr. Laura-Kathryn.
Wow. So Grammarly was originally an app that was just like a way to help you spell check and make sure your grammar's correct and these kind of things, right? We used them for papers. A lot of higher education institutions used it, but now Grammarly has embedded AI as a part of their thing, and you can actually add the Grammarly extension to your email. You can put it on your Gmail. You can have it on your desktop to where it checks everything. You can use it it's even on your mobile devices now. And the cool thing about Grammarly is it helps you ensure that you have consistent professional communication, right? Across the board without disrupting your entire workload of trying to figure out what you're doing. And in the particular episode, we kind of walked through kind of a document review process where we said, okay, here's the initial draft. Then we had an automated Grammarly review that made a bunch of suggestions, both AI generated and just grammatical in nature, because it's been a long time since we all did third grade grammar for sure, right? And then the manual context check. You can check for errors, you can check for voice, you can check for consistency. So for really large, comprehensive reviews, comprehensive reports, as a chief financial officer of a hospital system, I had to do large report outs on a regular basis to the board of trustees, board of directors, ownership, those kind of things. It helps you kind of have that consistency to go through the entire thing. It can read the whole thing. Does Word have some of those features? Absolutely, but it's more of an editor, right? So it's a level up, if you will. It's upping your game in these types of communications. And so it creates also a consistent voice. And that was the thing that we honed in quite a bit in that episode, Joe, was making sure that if we use anything that's in a written word, it doesn't matter who's doing it. They're bringing their perspective, their bias, their thoughts, their way of speaking, their verbiage into the product. And when you are trying to create a consistent external vision to the world, whether it's as a medical practice, a higher education institution, as Joe Daraskevich, like, this is who I am. You want this to be consistent. And when you have a lot of people, we've talked quite a bit on different episode conversations so far about having a lot of colleagues involved in a process, having consistent voice with the output, what you show to the larger world, is super important. And Grammarly is a great tool to kind of do that, to bring everything down to that consistent language. And so I think that's one of the benefits about it. And it really kind of created a massive wave through higher education when they added the AI feature, because now all of a sudden everybody's stuff started looking like it was plagiarized or it was AI generated, because it is an AI feature in it now. It's embedded in the product. You can use the version that doesn't have AI in it, but then what is the point of using it? You can use Word to do the same thing, right? And so we as higher education institutions, we had to figure out what our game plan is if we're encouraging students to use Grammarly and everything's coming back and looking at AI generated because they accepted the choices. But in the real world, when it comes to what we're providing to the real world, patient education pieces, external reports out on what's happening, responses to Medicare, responses, even doing prior authorization letters. You want that consistent stuff. You can do formatting and templates and things like that. Grammarly can help with all of those features. So it really is one more tool that can actually create that consistency factor in a way that's leveraged by your entire team, versus now what we've done in the past, which is everything was individually generated and you would send it to your boss and they'd have to redline it and change it because they didn't like the way you said this, or they don't like that word and they like this word instead. And Grammarly can kind of create some of that consistency, which is one thing I love about it.
Yeah, I like that example you gave where the students, all their stuff will all look the same, but that's what you want in an office space. You don't want, one employee sending an email on Tuesday that's a little more, loosey-goosey, and then a different employee on Thursday sending one that's real buttoned up. You want them all to look the exact same when they're going out and have that same professional feel to them. Fraser, any thoughts? I know, Dr. Laura-Kathryn said it's been since third grade since we've all took grammar classes, but you've got pretty good grammar. What are your thoughts on Grammarly?
Well, thanks, Joe. Um, yeah, my only thought is just knowing how much physician practices in particular spend with their reputation in the community. And of course, all the Yelp scores and everything else, how they're judged, having that consistency and protecting your reputation and making sure everything that leaves the office is of a certain quality and speaking with the same tone, I think is so important. So yeah, definitely encourage folks looking at that tool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good one for sure. All right, well, let's jump through right on the next one. This is another one we talked about. People have some experience with things, and then we're gonna let them know what they can do by pushing it to the next level. The Zoom free tier. We're all kind of familiar with Zoom, but there are things that you can do with Zoom that are you may not be thinking about. So, Dr. Laura-Kathryn, let them know what they can do.
Well, we're on Zoom right now, so we know that everybody's using Zoom, right? And we know that that is a thing. But the free tier, one of the things that we talked about a lot is that it can create mechanisms for internal communications, as long as it's under 40 minutes, right? You can use the free version. But the free version lacks the HIPAA compliance component, right? So it's really unsuitable for patient communications. And we know that there were some challenges, especially during COVID, with that, right? Institutions said, we have Zoom, we'll just talk to our patients on that, not realizing that if you're using the free version of Zoom you've already used, now you have a problem with HIPAA compliance, and anyone can crash your party. And if you remember a lot of stories about people having bad actors jumping into their Zoom sessions because they'll put in a random notification, if you don't have it blocked to where you're a part of the invite, not understanding how it works, all of a sudden you've got interlopers in a meeting that don't belong. So we did talk quite a bit about the differences between using the free version versus the not. But one of the things that's really helpful that we talked about is using Zoom for staff huddles, for vendor check-ins, for brief training modules. So you can use Zoom to record your training. You use it with Stripe and some other features, and you can actually create, like you talked about earlier, Fraser, with the companies using it for onboarding. You can actually, as part of your Trello board, have links out to, or have the Zoom recordings embedded in your Trello board that are the Zoom trainings. Like, here's how we do HIPAA in this office. Here's your bloodborne pathogen training that you have to do. Here's how you handle patients that come into your organization that have AIDS or something along those lines. We had videos that we did through Zoom in these shorter sprints on how to handle things when we would treat prisoners, because we would also see a large prison population. So there are protocols and things that you want to talk about, and it helps speed up. Instead of me sitting there joining on and you and I being on a conversation, we're talking, you can leverage Zoom as a way to record those things and then have them out and have them available. And then it's in a library, right, for training. So we really talked in that episode quite a bit about how you can use it internally with all of these different features. One of the practices that I managed, we had 7 locations. Yeah, try having a staff meeting with 7 locations. Practically impossible. But you can have one person log into Zoom and everybody sit in the lunchroom at that location, and you can have a full-blown staff meeting with everybody. Or you can have the physicians get on a call and talk about a patient rather than trying to do it over the phone. They can actually even bring that physician into the room and do a secondary consult on Zoom, right? If you're using the HIPAA version, that's what you want to do. If you're not doing a patient one, you can use the other one. But the other thing we talked about is thinking. We did touch on the patient-facing version because that is important. We have there's countless cases now. You can read them in the AMA or any other location where they talk about, a physician in America treating a patient in Zimbabwe, right? Or somebody who's stuck and there's an emergency situation and they're on mission and they're in the backwoods of the Amazon. If they've got a cellular signal or using a cellular site, they can connect over Zoom and a physician can see what's going on and walk you through what's happening. So there's a lot of ways that Zoom, like some of the other ones, can we used to have Skype. I think Skype was the other one, right? And we had WebEx and we have a lot of these things. But Zoom is now more universal and is less restrictive and has more features than those other products. So they're like products from the past, and like Zoom is the new thing. So
Yeah. Well, and Fraser,
Yeah.
you have a lot of experience with Zoom. Jump right in. Let us know what how you
Too
feel about it.
much. Yeah, too much experience with Zoom. Actually, no, and we kicked GoToMeeting to the curb quickly during
yeah.
COVID just because Zoom came up and really started to blossom. So we quickly transitioned into a Zoom world. I do like the free version because you got that 40-minute window, right? And it's going to kick you off your meeting no matter what. So that's a great exit strategy for any of you that need those from those long meetings.
Mhm.
But we just a simple case this past week. We've got an employee that's going to her first annual meeting, FMA annual meeting. In later on this month, and she hasn't been before, so she's like, what to expect. I'm like, well, I made this delegation video like a year ago on what to expect being a delegate going to the FMA annual meeting your first time. I'm like, watch the video and then come back and we'll talk about it. And we use that as a tool to get her prepared for what to expect for the upcoming meeting, give her that comfort level. So that was a quick, easy example of where something that we had in our recordings already was able to
Mhm.
share it with her and give her that level of comfort. So
Mhm.
Yeah, and Fraser, in the episode, I gave the example of when we had, you can record, Zoom calls and things like that, but you can also go the other way where we had that call a few months ago where we didn't record it, and we did that on purpose because we wanted people to speak freely and say, hey, we're gonna have a Q&A where this isn't going to be shared elsewhere. This is for a specific group of people, and don't worry about it, going in front of other eyes. So there's a lot of different ways you can kind of play with the features. So.
Yeah.
I hope everyone's used Zoom a little bit in the past, and just kind of think about how you can use it in your workplace as well.
Well, I would say the other thing too, we did our huge AI symposium a couple weeks ago, right? And well, it's been a few more weeks than that. It was in April, and we had over 600 participants. We used the Zoom webinar now, so now Zoom now also has its webinar version where it's more that 1D webinar. So you can do a virtual. We did a virtual symposium, and to where people can use the Q&A feature and those kind of things. So if you have those larger things, if you have a situation like remember where all of you met me in the first place, which was the day before Milton hit Florida, and I was at the Bone Society conference down in Tampa, right? And that situation where so many people left early from the conference because they wanted to get out of Florida before the hurricane hit. That's one of those where you could have called it and then had a virtual day to pick up whatever was on the schedule for the remainder, and done 3 weeks from now, done it virtually and done that kind of a thing too. So there's a lot of versatility, which like you said, Fraser, WebEx and GoToMeeting and those, they don't have the same level of flexibility to do that. And those features are fantastic and everybody's more comfortable with it. Sometimes people get a little too comfortable on Zoom. Like I've had students show up in their pajamas when I've had a one-on-one meeting with a student, but you can also create those expectations. And like you, Fraser, that 40-minute cutoff is fantastic because there are people who just go on forever and it's like, oh, really, we need to be done.
Yeah.
So, reminding them and having the clock running. Joe is always good about keeping the clock running when he talks with me because I can talk forever. So there's a lot of nice features that the free version has, which anybody can leverage personally and professionally. I mean, think about it. During COVID, the only way I saw my kids and my grandkids was over Zoom.
Well, and speaking of that 40 minutes, I think we're using the paid version today because I think we've gone over our 40 minutes, but that's okay. If you're, I'm hoping, when we're sending this out, we can tell people to, skip through and kind of get to their favorite little pockets. And then a reminder, if you are fast forwarding through, we've said it a few times already, but we have show notes with each one of our individual episodes. So if you go back and want to listen to episode 7 or episode 6, there's also show notes right there with you. So you can, kind of read what we're talking about as we go. So, all right, we're in the home stretch here. Episode 9, we're bringing back Trello. So this was performance management with Trello and AI tools. So this was also a really handy episode for, using Trello, but also using it in a different way. So jump right in, Dr. Laura-Kathryn.
So I would say that was another one that was one of the most practical that we did, because jumping off of what Fraser's comment was earlier about the organization that used it for onboarding, we talked about using Trello and AI in onboarding, in hiring decisions, in screening for candidates. That episode is very rich. So if you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to go through all of the details. And the show notes have a lot of details in them as well in that particular episode. But kind of some really key highlights about the Trello piece is that we leverage the Butler automation, which is the new thing that they brought out this year, which is fantastic, right? It prevents some recency bias, because you have a tendency to kind of only remember the things that are super, super important in your head, but things that are not as important can fall to the wayside. So the Butler automation piece, especially when it comes to onboarding processes, right? They need to get certain things learned and documents done on a certain time. They've got to have this, you got to have your I-9 done. You got to have all these things done. You can use that Butler automation component to kind of make those reminders happen to you and to them. If somebody misses that deadline, then you can follow up with that new candidate and say, hey, before we can get you in and start your first day, we're gonna have to move your first start day, because now we don't have these documents in place, and those are, so it creates more of that conversational piece, right? Like Fraser mentioned. And the other part about it was using it to design what we call STAR method templates, right? That is more of that situational. Here's the situation. Here was the task at hand. Here's the assessment. Here was the result of what we did. And so it helps you with interviewing as well. So you can have an onboarding process in Trello that kind of helps screen your candidates. And then when they come into the interview phase, you can use Trello to kind of manage based on the way the conversation is going. You don't want to have in every interview kind of static interview questions, because every candidate is unique. So you want it to feel more organic and not staged, right? No one gets a poor impression of an organization if it feels very dry, very staged, and very automatic. You don't feel like they value you, and you don't feel like maybe they're not going to value me when I come there. And so using the STAR method and the Trello boards, you can, based on the conversation, have situational questions, situational based interviewing pieces you want to use, but you can leverage them by the cards and say, okay, these are in these categories. And based on what I've learned about this candidate so far, I want to hone in on this. I really want to dig in. They're really spectacular here. I don't need to waste time on asking these things. I feel comfortable with this. I want to spend some time here. And so it helps you do that. And the cool thing is we tied this episode with a new free thing I found called Gender Decoder. And it's not gender from the perspective of we're trying to figure out, something super. It's about language. And it's about, what are we putting in our job descriptions? What are we putting in our onboarding documents? What are we putting on things where it has genderized specific language that can potentially create some misunderstandings about what's expected, and then also create some misunderstandings about whether or not they're going to be appreciated for who they are. And so in that episode, it was really kind of funny, because I actually put Fraser or Joe to work in that episode. And I said, okay, when I say these words, what do you think? Is that masculine or feminine? And he's like, I think it's this. And it was great. It was a lot of fun. But leveraging free apps like that can help you kind of neutralize the things that you're putting out in the public, because what you don't want is a job description to go out there that has majority masculine language, and you're going to put off female candidates when when it's not a role that requires to be one gender or the other, right? Or one preference or the other. And so it really kind of neutralizes that. In our current environment, that's really important, especially, since the new elections happened and we've had all these things. There's a lot of things going on in these spaces, and there's a lot of feelings around those things. And if we can do things even from a language perspective to kind of neutralize some of the terms we're using that we're putting out in that professional image, that makes a big difference. And you can attract a lot more candidates that you might not even realize you're detracting to come to your organization, just based on something as simple as the way you worded a job description.
Yeah, I was gonna say go back and listen to that episode because it's we're not gonna redo the quiz now or anything like that, but it was a very, these words just seemed like, and I'm a journalist in the past. I've worked with words my whole life, but it was one of those things where you might not think about it, and maybe you work in a workplace that is heavily male dominant, and you guys are putting out something that is a little bit more leaning one way than the other. This is just a way to streamline it and make it a little bit more neutral as far as or vice versa. You're working a place with mostly women working there, and it comes out going that way. But go back and listen to that episode. The quiz is really interesting, and we didn't stage it or anything. I had no idea which way it was going. But Fraser, any thoughts on performance evaluation and Trello and onboarding and things like that? I know we talked about it a little bit already.
Yeah, well, I have a question, and the audience wants to know whether you passed or failed this quiz, Joe. You haven't revealed that yet.
He did
Did he
pass.
pass it?
I passed.
Okay.
I passed,
I
but it
think
was
All
kind
right.
I think his
It's close.
journalistic background made a difference.
yeah, and
Okay,
I mean, it was maybe my coin. I flipped a quarter, and it was a 50-50 guess. So I was sweating a little bit on that episode, but no. And the other thing we were talking about in that episode too was with performance evaluations and things like that, where you come up to December and you're like, oh man, I gotta like figure out what this employee did over the last 12 months. And so many employees, their lives are different. Where I know in our organization, Fraser, you have conference season where you have a bunch of conferences, but those aren't generally right around the end of the year. So it's like Trello is a good way of keeping track of how everyone's doing throughout the year and kind of evaluating people in real time rather than scrambling. Oh gosh, I have 2 weeks left, to make this decision. And there's tools within the tools that you can utilize.
We talked a lot about recency bias in that part of the episode. And so recency bias is where you only really think about you can remember bad stuff for a long period of time. But
Right.
recency bias in this instance related to performance evaluation was more about we only remember the really good things that happened just recently. And using a Trello board to track that, whether it's on a personal level to write your self evaluation or as a supervisor to really write an evaluation, it's a great way for you to say, oh, this person did this something stellar. So I'm going to run in today. I can use it on my phone because your Trello board can be on your mobile. And I'm going to put a note in that so and so really did this and this and this and this. And then you can do that as well to track things that are challenging. And then by the time you get to the evaluation, you have this entire book of business that you've done on this particular individual. So it's more intentional about what they did. And then you can actually give them more of an unbiased evaluation because you're not only focusing on the things you remember in the last 90 days. That's number one. The other part of that we also talked about in that episode, Joe, was about how you can use it to help encourage additional growth and training and professional development. And you can actually use that as well and say, okay, we decided it's your goal this year that you're going to work on XYZ as your professional development. And you can actually put those in the Trello board and you and that person can track their progress along the way, which also can help feed in and create a level of richness to the performance evaluation process that typically is not there in most institutions. And Trello
Yeah.
is a great tool to do that.
I can almost see Fraser right now typing in, Joe did a great job with this AI podcast series. It's going to be part of my performance evaluation coming up soon. Any
I'm
thoughts,
aware.
Fraser?
Well, I'm aware of my recency bias too, so I need to go back and look at the first few podcasts too, just to make sure.
They were all good. Every single one of them
They're
was
all
good.
good. Yeah, for sure. No, just saying, the thing I'll say is making the right hire is so important, right, for an organization. And we've always got our administrators looking for tools and tips on how to really, truly refine their interview and make sure they do get that right hire done correctly the first time. So definitely a proponent of any tool that can help you do that.
Yeah.
And
And
we're
and then
testing right now. We're testing right now. We usually have like this really complicated onboarding process where they have all these checks and balances and all these kind of things, but they're more of like the universal things you have to do as an onboarding, but it's not really job specific either, right? And a lot of times we can do a great job onboarding somebody to the organization, but we might not do, to your point, Fraser, the right job with the right candidate or even the wrong candidate and actually train them appropriately to really discern were they the right or wrong hire to begin with. And so one of the things that we did, we tested two models. We used Asana, which is another tool out there. It's more of a project management tool, kind of on steroids. It's like Trello on steroids. And then we used just Trello and we tracked two new hires through the process. We did one using the institutions process and then added Trello for the job specific. And then we used Asana to do the same thing. And what we found is it was less intimidating to use Trello from the end user perspective And we use the free versions too, right? Than the Asana, because Asana felt too much like you're doing this massive Gantt chart on steroids. And so using that, we were able to not only say, okay, here's your initial onboarding that's HR related, right? And then here's the onboarding components related to your actual job specifics. And then at the end, you can even have almost milestone checkoffs to where they're now have mastered these things by the end of their year, their 90 days. And then you can decide what the next plan is after that. And you can see that before the 90 days. Because how many of us have fallen victim to, we don't have the immediate information, and now it's like day 95, day 120, and we realize this was a bad hire and we're past the probationary period. Now what? Right? This is a great way to figure that out. Or we've discovered early on that they were fantastic. I call it the honeymoon phase, right? All of a sudden you're married to this beautiful blushing bride, and then day 94, Cruella DeVille shows up to work, and you're like, who is this? And you're like, how did this happen? And Trello is a great way for you to prevent those pieces from happening. And so
Yeah.
that episode was probably our second favorite. Again, had Trello in it, so we were
Yeah,
really
anything with
excited
Trello,
about that.
it's a really, really great tool. All right, well now we're gonna get emotional again, like we did in episode 10, because it's the end of our podcast series, end of our recap episode. But we talked about patient feedback analysis, and in particular, we talked about MonkeyLearn. MonkeyLearn. Do you want to refresh people's memories on what MonkeyLearn is all about?
Yeah, that one was a great. You're like, what in the world is
Yeah,
that?
I
And
was
so
like,
it is a sentiment analysis component. So we talked earlier about using Google Forms to do your patient surveys, right? And this is a great way to take that information that comes in, right? Taking it in that Google Sheet, and you can upload the Google Sheet. Sorry about this. I got a eyelash in my eye. You can take that information that comes off your Google Sheet from your Google form where you did your patient survey, all free, right? And then you drop it into MonkeyLearn, and it can process up to 300 patient comments. It can look at the qualitative pieces where people type in different things, not just the check boxes, and it actually creates an automated sentiment analysis that allows you to spot trends to make immediate change. And one of the examples I used was like, you got a Tuesday afternoon clinic, everything feels like it's absolute chaos. People are complaining, the wait time is ridiculous, but 6 months from now, you're going to forget about that Tuesday. But what you can have in your patient satisfactions is that it comes in, and all of a sudden you start seeing a trend where it's every Tuesday. It's not a one-off Tuesday, it's an every Tuesday component, right? And so MonkeyLearn helps you kind of identify that. It also does real-time monitoring. So it can actually send you an alert within 3 minutes of receiving feedback on any aspect, which means you can actually do this more than once a year. Most of the time we do patient satisfactions, you broad spectrum send out to all of your patients, and then you get all this feedback back, and you're like, I don't know what to do with any of this. You can actually, because it's more manageable, you can chunk it down to where you only send it to all the patients you saw this quarter. And then you can start trending over time what you're seeing from quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, quarter four in terms of patient satisfaction, patient commentary. You can do, like you said, Fraser, you can even broad spectrum your employees. Instead of having a Zoom call, you can send them an anonymous survey, and the stuff comes in, and you can make all this anonymous. And so it really helps you address issues as they before they escalate into something major. And things that we don't kind of, have you ever heard that expression of the frog that gets parboiled? Like, you raise the heat slowly, and the frog doesn't realize that he's being cooked because the water temperature feels good, and then it's so different than being in the shower. You go out and you look like a lobster because you thought the water was getting cold, right? It's the same thing that happens when it comes to data. We can get to where we get nose blind to what's coming in because, oh, it's one thing here, it's one thing there, it's one thing here, right? And then all of a sudden you actually look at the data. If you can't manage it, you don't know. But then all of a sudden you can say, in this facet, I can see it. And now it's like, wow, this really is a problem. And we just kind of blow it off or whatever. And it can come down to a particular physician. It can come down to a particular location. It can come down to a particular process. Like, there's so many things that this can do. And most of us are not good at doing sentiment analysis ourselves because we group it into categories that make sense to me because I'm looking at the data, and then I'm going to perceive that data in a way, and I'm going to tell you this is the truth. And what MonkeyLearn does is take the person out of the process and says, okay, here's what it is. You can set, these are the categories, and then you can refine them over time, but it gives you unbiased response in terms of this is where everything falls. And then you can really see things from a different perspective, which was one of my favorite things about it.
Yeah, and catching those trends is huge with MonkeyLearn, and it's positive trends, negative trends, and I like what you brought up too about the different locations. A Tuesday versus, we have so many different doctors' offices that you're on one side of town on Tuesday and another side of town on Wednesday, and if you see that trend in real time on, oh hey, I couldn't find parking on when I went to see my doctor on Wednesday, and then the next Wednesday happens, and then you can look at the trend and say, oh, there was construction going on, on the entrance to our parking lot. We can fix it before you're too far down the line. So I'm excited to hear some feedback from some of the practices out there on this tool and how it helped their lives. Fraser, any thoughts on MonkeyLearn and how spotting trends can be helpful?
Yeah, no, we had that conversation in our risk purchasing group that we run through the Florida Orthopedic Society, being able to timely respond to patient complaints and concerns and
Mhm.
how that can downstream, address risk management from a medical malpractice standpoint because you're attentive, you're listening, you've been flagged on this issue. So it's not a normal patient satisfaction report that's coming in. This is something that demands attention timely and the benefits it can have if you can successfully do that
Mhm.
downstream by avoiding, lawsuits and others too. Not to mention it's the right thing to do, but obviously protecting a business and your license by making sure you address, patient concerns in a timely manner. And it sounds like this is a tool that actually could help you flag those issues before they
And it
linger.
can remove, yeah, that the risk piece is important, right, Fraser? Because that's
Mhm.
something important for every practice. But I'll give you an example of how we used it, which solved a completely different problem we didn't even know we had. So we were getting this client of mine was getting some results. Kept saying that they had a problem doctor. We've all heard those conversations that this physician's a problem. And I was like, all right, well, let's just see if this doctor really is a problem. So we went through the process. We created a patient satisfaction survey. We added all the doctors on there, so it wasn't like out and this one doctor, but we added it all in there. We got the survey back. We had 7 locations involved in this practice. Sent it out to all the patients at the different locations, and they're like, well, this doctor's a problem. It doesn't matter which location he works at, he's always a problem. What we found out was when we ran it through MonkeyLearn is it's not the doctor that's the problem. It's the staff he's working at a particular location. So he has great wave reviews at 6 of the 7 locations. But when he goes to this one location, because the doctor travels, not the staff in this particular practice. That's not always the case. A lot of times they take their
Yeah.
favorite nurses and whatever and they travel with them everywhere. But in this instance, the physician is the one who traveled and the support staff stayed. Nurses and everybody stayed. And so he was the one who moved. And what we found was it was this one location. It was not him particularly. There was something about this one location. So then it helped us identify where it was because they were like on the ready, like they were ready to like offshoot this physician. But he was beloved at other locations, right? But they couldn't see that because all they could see was this was what they were hearing. This doctor's terrible. And so there's a lot of things to your point, Fraser, that you can discover when you do these types of dig ins that are super beneficial. And using a free tool to do it, why not? And MonkeyLearn is also HIPAA compliant.
Yeah, because there's companies that come in and implement a post-op monitoring, software system for you. Not saying that this could replace that, but the same thing. They're trying to mine for patient pain or recovery measures, post-op when they're not actually coming to your office. So what a great way if they're filling out a tool for you or a survey response form every day to flag responses that are abnormal and be able to respond to that when the patient, rather than waiting 3 weeks, 4 weeks until the next appointment to have them come back in. So
And
again,
for
there's
being a free version that does real time monitoring, like that's a double win.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, yep. And well, and I'm glad that Dr. Laura-Kathryn brought up the HIPAA compliant and everything. Like, and just as we're kind of wrapping up this episode, that is something that when you go back to each episode, we try to let you know what's HIPAA compliant, what isn't, where to be careful, where to make sure you're using it for just carefree kind of conversations rather than medical information. So that's one little stipulation that we say throughout this whole series is just be careful with what you're doing. Don't jump in, the deep end and think that everything's going to be completely safeguarded and everything like that. Just be careful as you're using these tools in the workplace, especially. So as we do with each episode, though, it's time to wrap this one up. Let's go around the room and just have our last thoughts. Maybe say your favorite AI tool and say how much fun you had doing this episode. So, Dr. Laura-Kathryn, kick us off with your favorite thing about AI and what you enjoyed most about this series.
I think my favorite thing I love about AI in general, irrespective of the application I'm using, is just the fact that it's fun to learn something new, but it's also really made my life considerably easier in many ways. And I think I'm much more efficient, which is really important considering the different things that I am involved in, both personally and professionally. Um, I would say that probably my favorite tool that I use the most, obviously, is my boyfriend Claude. And because he does make me sound much more together and makes me sound like a much more nicer, empathetic person. I tend to be more of a bullet point kind of a person, and he rounds out my edges nicely when I need to be. So I think that's helpful. And I would say from the series as a whole, I mean, obviously, it was an absolute joy to be on the podcast. I appreciate the invitation and have enjoyed it immensely. But I think the biggest thing about, if you would say a parting note, would be just pick something and play with it and go and practice and get involved and go figure out what works for you. Not every app works for every person and for every situation. There's no one size fits everything. It takes many of the applications working together, but they are still 4 or 5 applications working together is still much more efficient than you doing it by hand, which is the way you did it before.
Yep. Fraser, what's your favorite AI tool, and what's your favorite thing about this podcast series?
Well, I think I don't want to talk too much because that was a great way to wrap up the series. The best thing about the series, from my perspective, is being able to find someone like Laura-Kathryn to deliver these tools to our members. They come to us all the time talking about how they wish they had an extra hour in every day, an extra day in every week, just because they're trying to figure out how to get as many tasks as they have to get done within the time constraints they have. So it's awesome to be able to deliver something to them that hopefully they'll take to heart and find beneficial and give them a little bit of balance in that professional and personal life. My favorite tool, again, since I use it all the time, Zoom. I guess I'm a bit biased. I spend my whole life on Zoom. Therefore, I am the most comfortable with it and familiar with it. Bit Trello as well. I've enjoyed working in that and look forward to exploring more of the advanced features on Trello too.
Yeah, and from my answer is going to be no surprise to anybody. Trello is it's one of those where in each episode we kind of said Laura-Kathryn is the expert, and I'm just kind of the guy who's along for the ride. And you could just see my eyes light up every little feature we talked about with Trello, and like how we talked about everybody working together. Because I've been, you work remote, you don't see your coworkers as frequently as back in the day when you were all right there in the same room. And it's just one of those things that it kind of makes everybody work together and head in the same direction. And so anyway, Trello is my favorite. I think there's no surprise to anybody who's watched this for the whole time. And then my favorite thing about this series is I know we talked about AI, and a lot of that is working on your computers and things, but I've really enjoyed seeing people face to face come up to me who have watched this series and say, hey, we've been just trying to dabble a little bit in here and there, and just it's like just those little things have made the office life smoother, or it's got everybody kind of working on the same page. So while we're talking about AI and a lot of that is interacting with computers and things, I've really enjoyed hearing from the doctors and practice managers that I've seen in person just come up to me with a smile on their face, and even if it's just a 2-minute conversation where they say, hey, we tried to implement this one little thing and it really made a difference. And that's just what we want people to do. We want people to use these tools and utilize them as much or as little as you want. And we also said AI, there's no age range. Like you can be, a 2-year-old or you can be a 90-year-old, and you can utilize AI in some way. So we always say, don't be afraid of AI. Just use it a little bit if you want. It'll make things easier. Use it a lot if you want. It'll make things really easy. But then also be cautious wherever you're using it, because everyone's seen those Zoom stories where someone's not wearing pants on the bottom, and it stand up in the Zoom call or something. So we've all been there for the mishaps. So just be careful, but jump right in and enjoy it. So now's this time to say goodbye. Fraser, Dr. Laura-Kathryn, it's been a pleasure, and hopefully everyone's really enjoyed this series. So goodbye to you guys, and goodbye to everybody.
Take care.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you guys. Bye bye.